Welcome back to the channel and to level 2 of financial sacrifices. Let's get right into it. Alright, in the level 1 video, we discussed cutting back on excess spending, including online shopping, eating at restaurants, and other entertainment expenses. Today will be the next step of improving your financial state and saving yourself money, where we discuss utility value and getting the most for the money that you have. So that is, how do you make the current money you have go further, and how do you reduce the cost for the same essentials that you need to survive? What is utility value? Well, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's not really a trick question. Give yourself any object. What is the utility of that object, and then what is the value that you are willing to pay for that utility? So this relationship of the price you pay to the actual utility that it provides, that is the utility value. Let's use a hamburger as an example, right? The utility is that you eat it and it gives you energy to survive. You could also consider the enjoyment of eating it to be a little bit of utility, but that's not really the sole purpose of why we eat it. But on the other side, what is the value of a hamburger? So if you bought one locally at a restaurant near me, your meal with a few sides would probably be about $15 to $20 per person. Now, if you made the same meal at home using a similar recipe that you could prepare on your own, the cost would be roughly $3 to $5 per person for that same meal. Let's say that these hamburgers are, from a utility perspective, identical. They taste the same, they have the same level of nourishment, but you'll notice that the one on the restaurant is still 5 times more expensive. So from a utility perspective, they're completely identical, but the value perspective is what changes. So why is that? Well, what you're really paying for when you go to a restaurant is the convenience, or the perceived convenience, of not having to cook and clean on your own. But the 20 to 40 minutes of time that you perceive that you're saving by going out versus actually just making it on your own is easily consumed by getting ready, then driving there, finding a place to park, getting the food or waiting for it, and then later driving back as well. So the reality is, it's not really saving you time in the long run, it's just saving you from getting your hands wet when you're washing the dishes afterwards. You also have to factor in the price of gas or commuting to get to the meal, if there's a parking expense as well. So depending on where you live, when you factor those in, now your burger at the restaurant can cost you up to $25 per person, which is now 7 times the price of cooking at home. But really, it doesn't give you any additional utility, it consumes the same amount of time, so it doesn't tangibly provide you any benefit when you're considering it from a survival perspective. So this relationship between the price you pay versus the actual survival benefit, that is your utility value. And like I said in the intro video, I'm going to be very blunt on this. This is not about convenience. This is not about fun. This is about surviving. This is about doing what you need to do to get by so you can afford the essentials that you need. So that said, when you're spending money, because you have to spend money on some things, utility value should dictate how you spend it so that you know you're getting the most for the dollar you have. So here's really how to leverage this. Every time you're about to make a purchase, consider 2 things. Think of, what is the actual utility of this? What is the function that I need it to do? And is this actually something I need for survival, or is this something that I just want? Then, what is the real value that I am willing to pay for that utility, for that necessity in my life? And on the other hand, can you get the same functionality, the same utility, but at a lower price? That is the value portion of this. What you want to do is start maximizing this value portion, and then what you'll find is your money slowly starts to go further and further, but you don't have any drop in quality of life. So I'm going to run through 8 examples that I have personally done, or that I have helped others do, to try to showcase what this really means in a practical setting. So example number 1, the level 1 video, I talked about how useless online purchases like trinkets and gadgets, how they don't really have any real utility, or that the utility isn't any better than something you might already have or already have access to. So when you're making these online purchases, because there's no actual utility and no quality of life benefit, there's no utility value to it, because it's all cost with no real tangible benefit from it. So that's why the level 1 video was all about reducing those expenses, is those are typically the lowest utility value because they're not necessities, but you spend a lot of money on them. And it's the same thing for people who spend a ridiculous amount of money on clothing but are struggling to get by. If you have 2 brands and they have similar quality and they have a similar appearance and they fit you just as well, but one is is 2 to 3 times more expensive? Is the functionality of it really 2 to 3 times better? And are you truly in a position that you can justify that price difference? And the answer is probably not. So as a caveat for clothing specifically, utility is more than just having something that covers your skin. There's also if something fits better, if it has better materials, it's more comfortable. There's other factors there as well. There's definitely a real impact to having clothing that looks more professional and comes off as more professional. Those are very real factors to consider. So I don't want to undermine those here, but what you have to do is going back to what you want versus what you need, right? If you have 2 shirts that do the same thing, but one is a special brand that's $800 a shirt, you probably don't need that to get the same end result. So going back to the example I used in the level 1 video where someone had a set budget and they just, kind of ignored that and went over that budget every single week, they could have saved $4,368 per year just by hitting that target budget, basically by doing this, by not buying the expensive version of something and just buying the cheaper one and adhering to the budgets they set. Example number 2 is, let's say you have a utility that you truly need. This is something that you actually have to survive. Shop around. See if there's a way to get the same service or the same benefit for a lower price somewhere else. Let's say, for example, that you have something that you have to purchase. You actually need it, right? Can you get that object on a different website or a different store for a lower price? Is there a coupon available for it? Is it going to go on sale? And can you wait a week or 2 for that to happen? Alternatively, is there something else that you can buy that fits the exact same purpose but at a lower price point? Let me give you an example, is that this video thing is kind of like my main hobby, right? And this ring light that I have behind the camera, it was listed typically between $150 and $180. Instead, I found that I could buy a tripod stand for $15 and a dimmable LED floodlight for $25. So I added both of those into my Amazon cart, and then mysteriously this $150 ring light went on sale for $45, which made it comparable to the other setup that I was going to buy. Which, by the way, Amazon, sketchy. I caught that. But there's also websites like camel.com. They do things like price tracking. So you put in the URL of something you're interested in. It'll show the historic prices and let you know whether or not you're buying it at a high point or at a low point. So let me give you an example, right? Is I have this big curved monitor behind me. This is normally like a $1,600 monitor. But what I did was I price tracked it, I kept an eye on it, and I waited for it to go on sale. And I ended up buying it for about $650, which was a price of a comparable monitor that I was looking at that was about 1/3 of the size. So just be smart, try to find the same thing for cheaper or to time it accordingly so you spend less money to get the same thing. Moving on now to example number 3, cooking versus eating out at restaurants. So as I mentioned earlier in this episode and in level 1, it's about 1/5 of the cost to cook at home versus eating out. And you might be saying, oh, but I'm not a good cook. Let me genuinely ask you something, okay? Do you think Picasso was a perfect artist the first time he picked up a paintbrush? Probably not. He was probably terrible. Everyone has to start somewhere, and cooking is really not that difficult. There's a ton of helpful videos and stuff online. There's a ton of recipes available. They walk you through absolutely everything. And using the actual numbers from someone I helped budget from the level 1 video that I'll link below, the person that I was helping budget could have saved $5,280 a year by prepping their own food instead of going out 2 to 3 times a week. Which brings us nicely into example number 4. Let's say you are now going grocery shopping and you are officially cooking things on your own. Well, if you're at the grocery store, are there other store brands or brands that are less expensive with comparable taste? Or are there alternative foods that you can eat that are cheaper than the ones that you are currently buying? So for example, chicken costs about $3 per pound near me, whereas steak starts at $8 a pound but goes upwards of $20 a pound. So on one hand, I recognize that certain brands or certain foods don't taste as good, they're not as good for you, there's other reasons to not buy them. To some extent, you'll have to make that decision on your own about what is actually worth paying for you. That is your choice, and I cannot make that for you. But there's so many products and so many instances where if you did a back-to-back taste test of a store brand versus the name brand, you probably would not be able to tell the difference. And again, not on everything, but there are so many examples. So let's go into like an actual numbers example. If you have a brand of chips, it's your all-time favorite, let's say it's $4 a bag, but the store brand tastes like absolute cardboard that was dipped in a toilet and it costs like $3.75 per bag. In that case, probably worth the extra 25 cents for the one that's good. Substantially better product, it is a 6.7% price difference, not a huge deal at that point, but let's say your favorite brand is $6 a bag and the store brand is $2 a bag. Now you are talking about a 300% markup. Is the flavor really bad enough on the store brand to justify paying 3 times the price for the other name brand? Again, you're gonna have to make that decision on your own, but in my case, I would say probably not for most things. Another thing to look for is a lot of brands have different package sizes, so you might be saying, oh, well, this bag is more expensive, but you also get more out of it. So as long as you're going to consume all of it, the thing to focus on is typically the unit price, which tells you if you have a set amount, how much are you paying for that set amount? By combining these few things, right? Shopping by unit price, looking at cheaper alternative brands, and then finding alternative foods that are less expensive in some cases. I personally saved an average of about $33 a week, and I was not really overspending in groceries to begin with. But in my case, that translated to $1,716 per year. Example 5, insurance. This could be car insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, any type of insurance at all. Is there anything you can do with your current insurance provider, any discounts they offer to lower your rates for the same coverage? If not, is there a different company that you can go to that gives you the same coverage, the same level of service, but at a better price? That's what you're really going for here. If they give you the same exact service, that is the same level of utility, but if the price is lower, that is a better utility value. Do your homework, shop around a little bit. When I was due to renew my car insurance for the year, I did a little bit of homework. I spent about 2 hours researching all the different companies. And that seems like a little bit of a daunting task to spend 2 hours of your weekend only looking at car insurance. But the result was I saved about $1,000 per year between my home insurance and my auto insurance. So looking at this another way, if you take the $1,000 of savings versus the 2 hours of effort, that's like getting paid $500 an hour for those 2 hours of work. So I don't know about you guys, but I personally do not make $500 per hour at my day job. So for me, spending the 2 hours to do this was absolutely worthwhile. The same thing applies to example number 6, which is your actual utilities, right? Your phone, your internet, your cable bills, heating and air conditioning costs. Are there different phone or internet companies, different wireless companies that you can use that give you the same service or comparable service, but they do it at a much lower price? Is there a different way to heat or cool your house or apartment that is more efficient and less costly? And then if you're going really extreme here, do you truly need that cell phone, or do you truly need internet connection to survive? Is it something that you can eliminate altogether? Can you cut back on streaming services? It's all kind of the same concept, and I realize not everyone can cut out all of these. You need to be able to get in contact with your family. Or for me, I work remote a lot, so I have to have internet connection for my job. So not everything is an option for everyone, but it is something to consider if that is an option for you. I'm planning to do a series on this in the future, but this is a major thing that I looked into, especially as a homeowner, as someone who's going to be in the same place for a long period of time. And by doing some pretty basic energy efficiency improvements, it saved me roughly $330 a month or $3,960 per year. From a utility perspective, my house is heated and cooled to the same temperatures in the summer and the winter as they were before, but because it's more efficient, it is now saving almost $4,000 per year. Even if it's something that costs you a little more money up front, if it saves you $4,000 per year, does it cost you that much to implement up front, and are you going to live there for longer than a year? Moving on now to example number 7, and this is huge, especially if you have high dollar value loans. So for example, I had student loans. I had over $100,000 worth when I graduated. I also have a mortgage. Kind of like the last few examples, you want to have the same utility. So in this case, the utility is your debt. It's having the money loaned to you, but you want to have it at a lower cost. So here, the real way to do that is to lower your interest rates. So I've done a full video that explains compound interest. I'll link that in the description below. But the long-term effects of compound interest, you see it both on the month-to-month basis as well as how it impacts you in your total payoff amount long-term. And this is one of the biggest things I did to save a substantial amount of money. So for example here, I refinanced my student loans, and on the interest rate alone, I saved $100 per month. And on my house, I refinanced that as well when the mortgage rates were really low. That saved an additional $200 per month. So between the two of those, just by refinancing, I saved $300 a month or $3,600 a year just by refinancing at a lower interest rate. Now extrapolate that value out by the 10 years or the 30 years it takes you to pay back a loan, and that saves you an absurd amount of money. On my student loans alone, I saved, I think, $75,000, give or take, and then on the house, I'm on track to save an additional, I think, $80,000 or $90,000. And again, this is money over a prolonged period of time, but that is the kind of dollar value you save by doing these things near term. Number 8 is also a big one, but it mostly applies if you own stuff. So specifically a house, a car, anything that requires maintenance. But this is probably where I save the vast majority of my money over the years, and that is doing things on your own instead of paying somebody else to do them. This category is actually one of the very first things I personally started doing, and that is maintaining and repairing your own vehicles. And I started doing that back when I was in college. Especially if you have a car that's more than 5 years old, most of the major problems or repairs that you have are going to be well documented online in YouTube videos, in forums. Somebody has probably had the problem before. Somebody probably has a solution for it. You can literally go to Google, type in the year, make, model of the car, and whatever noise or symptoms you have, and somebody will probably have the same words as you with an answer posted next to it. I realize that this sounds intimidating and a lot of people don't know what they're doing, but like I said earlier, nobody starts as an expert. You have to learn somewhere. So start basic. Start with your oil changes. Start with your basic tune-ups. There's a ton of instructionals online, including a few on this channel. At this point, I've done pretty much everything shy of a full engine rebuild, but I had to start somewhere and I started small. You're not going to learn unless you give it a shot. So that's really where you have to start, is just taking that initiative to get going. But let's look at this from the financial side, right? If you have a big repair that your car needs, you can go and pay a mechanic, but for the same price, you can buy all the tools you need, you can buy all the parts you need, and in most cases, you'll probably still have money left over, but typically you'll at least break even when you factor in that you have to buy tools. But then after that first repair, your tools are now paid off. They paid for themselves in the first 1 to 2 jobs, and everything past that, you're saving money on. Alternatively, let's say you don't even want to get to that point, you don't have the money for tools up front. There are so many parts stores out there that if you buy the parts through them, they have a free tool rental program because they know that's how they bring in customers to sell more parts. What you do is you put down a credit card, they put a hold on the card so that if you don't return it, you have to pay for it, but the second you return it, you get 100% of that money back, and then you get to use the tool, you get all of the benefits of doing it on your own, but with none of the upfront cost that deters a lot of people. Now let's go into a very specific example of what I mean here. One of my friends recently received a $4,500 repair estimate to repair their van. And at this point, I've got the basic hand tools, I've got wrenches, I've got sockets, I've got stuff like that. We fixed everything on their list in my driveway over the course of a weekend for $850. So basically, we saved them $1,825 per day that we worked on their van. And these were not 2 full days. So I don't know about you guys, personally, I don't typically make $1,825 per day at my normal job. So saving that much money per day and still having time left over at the end of the day, absolutely worthwhile if what you're trying to do is save yourself money. Most likely though, your car doesn't need that much work on a routine basis. If it does, you should probably consider just getting a new vehicle at that point. But let's say something like this happens once per year. Let's count that as an annual savings of $3,650 in this case, assuming it didn't happen to them again. Even in my own personal case, my dream car, my Dodge Viper that I purchased, pretty much the only reason I was able to justify it is because I did the repairs myself, and that was the way I was able to make it work and that I was able to afford it. So when people come here and they're like, oh, you have multiple vehicles, must be nice, you're lucky, mom and dad's money, whatever, that's not at all what it is. This is literally the only reason I can make this work, right? By doing the repairs myself, I get that same utility of having the full repair done, but I have a much lower price point because I'm doing the work. So really, even though I own multiple vehicles, I pay less for them than some people pay for a single vehicle, and then I spend less maintaining all of my vehicles than that one friend spends maintaining their van. The other big side, at least for me, is as a homeowner, right? Home repairs and home improvements. And again, I know this doesn't apply to everyone, but that includes woodworking, electrical, plumbing, landscaping, whatever can break in a house, which is pretty much everything. If you do at least some of it yourself, you have a potential to save a lot of money as long as you do it correctly. correctly. Getting into specifics here, right? Just like the auto repairs, almost everything that you could possibly do to a house has detailed instructions on YouTube or other websites of how to do it. And I know everyone's initial reaction is, oh, well, you have to buy the tools and those are expensive. You don't buy them all at once. Buy them incrementally, prioritize what you need, and buy the ones that you get the most utility from that can do the most things for the least amount of money. They'll probably pay for themselves in the first 1 to 2 uses, and then after that, you're pretty much using them free of charge. Let's give some numbers here, okay? So when I first moved in, I renovated my garage. It's like one of the first video series I ever did on YouTube. It's got like 2 whole views. I'll be honest, it's not the best done video, but if I had paid somebody else to come in, even if I already bought the materials myself, it would have cost about $8,000 in labor for somebody else to do the painting, the install, even though I already bought the materials myself. Had I not provided the materials, that estimate would have been closer to $12,000 to do what I did in that garage. It took me about 2 to 3 months of my spare time, so it's not an insignificant amount of time that I put into it, but a professional is going to have a wait list anyway. They are going to take roughly the same amount of time to get to it, but by doing it myself and by shopping smart to get the best deal on materials, using the principles that we discussed in this video, I renovated the entire garage on my own for less than $500. So basically, the total time frame of how long it took me versus how long it would have taken a professional given their backlog, I got it done by the same end date, but I saved $11,300 based on the estimates I was given. Now, I also did a closet renovation. I've got a series on that as well. A professional would have cost me roughly $5,000 to $7,000 to do the renovation I did with some custom shelving. I spent less than $150 of materials to get the same job done. So again, doing the math here, that's almost $5,000 left over to buy tools with. Now, as a quick caveat, right, that was my first major project like that and my first time building shelves, and I did it while recovering from a very serious brain injury. You could feasibly make the argument that a professional would do a better job or they would have made nicer shelves or something like that. But if you really wanted to make that critique, I guess I'll just have to cry about it into the $6,850 that I saved. Next monetary example, and I know that this one is not for everyone, but I like building stuff as well, so I'm a huge DIYer. I also build most of my own furniture if I have the ability to do so. This includes my coffee table, my end tables, my bed set. If I were to buy comparable pieces from an actual furniture store, even if I got something secondhand, I was not going to be able to spend less than $1,200. I was probably going to be closer to $2,500 in total for the tables. Now, I built all 3 of those for roughly $235 in materials, and then I used the savings to buy all of the tools and saws I needed, and then had those left over for any other projects I wanted to tackle. So even when you factor in all the tools that I had to buy, the total I spent on all of that was still less than the $1,200 minimum that I would have spent to get comparable pieces. By comparison, the bed set that I built would have been somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 to get a comparable one at the store, but again, not one that was exactly what I wanted. So instead, what I did is I built the exact one I did want that is perfect for my needs for a grand total of $365 of materials. And I didn't have to buy any additional tooling over what I already bought for the first 2 projects. Now, granted, because I was being a perfectionist, some of these took me a little bit more time than I was anticipating, but again, I saved about $3,500 by doing these myself, and then I got something that I liked more and that I have a lot more pride in with better build quality than what I would have bought off the shelf. Now, if you're interested in those, the bed set is the only one I've done a build series on, but the entire thing was with basic tools. I didn't want to use anything elaborate because, like everyone else out there, I had to start somewhere. I only had the basic essentials, and really what it came down to is being like everyone else, my money was finite. So the money I had to prioritize what I spent it on, and basically got the tools that were just enough to get the job done. And the final example I'll use is a series that I recently started posting. The retaining wall in my backyard collapsed. I had to get that repaired. And unbeknownst to me, those are egregiously expensive, like ridiculously expensive. So every professional quoted me a minimum of about $20,000 to remove the old wall, get the materials, and then put in the new wall. This wasn't with any additional excavations. This wasn't with any other odds and ends. This also wasn't to expand my yard, which is what I'm doing in that renovation series. This was literally the bare minimum of take away the broken one, put up the new one. That's it. $20,000. $30,000. Now, by comparison, materials are still egregiously expensive. There's still parts of the excavation that I still had to hire somebody else to do. Even so, my total spent was about $7,000, slightly under that, which means I saved a minimum, absolute minimum of $13,000 by doing most of the work myself over the course of a couple of months. And again, that is still hiring professionals for the parts that I knew I could not do on my own. But like I said, what I did was also above and beyond what was quoted for that 20 grand. So if you actually factor in all the things I did, the quotes for that were closer to $40,000 or $50,000, which means the reality of the end product versus what I was quoted for saved me roughly $35,000 to $40,000. One project, couple months long. At the time of filming, I have owned my house for 4.5 years, okay? So let's do some math. If you add up all the savings on these house projects and you take the minimum savings on the retaining wall, you take the 13 grand instead of the 30-something thousand dollar figure, I've still saved roughly $35,000 over the last 4 to 4.5 years when you factor in those projects with the other repairs I've done on my own. And in the end, I get better utility out of them. I have better build quality of products. I have things that are going to last longer and that are exactly what I want. So for anyone wondering how I bought a Dodge Viper, I paid $35,000 for that car. These projects saved me $35,000 over 4 years. You're probably starting to connect the dots. So legitimately, if I had $0 saved, but every time something broke and I took the full amount that a professional wanted, I put it to the side and then repaired it myself, that alone pays for the car in full. And again, those aren't even all the repairs I've done. The true total is a lot higher than that. Taking the true total of what I've saved of all the projects, everything I've repaired on my own, when you spread it out over the 4.5 years I've owned this house, I still saved an average of $750 a month or $9,000 a year by doing repairs and projects on my own. So if you own anything that needs maintenance, that needs repairs, that is a huge opportunity for savings. So to recap here, in all these examples, what it comes down to is if you find that you need something, if you truly need something, ask yourself, is this something that you can do yourself? Can you buy it yourself or find a way to get it cheaper instead of paying somebody else top dollar to do it for you? Can you get the same utility but at a lower price point to get a better utility value? So yes, that does include cooking versus eating out. It's covered under the same umbrella. But when I started doing this, when I started getting really serious about these expenses and saving money, I already had fairly good spending habits. I already minimized or eliminated most of my entertainment expenses and my excess expenses, but most people don't. That's why I listed that as level 1. So for me, this was really my starting ground, but this was really the biggest magnitude of cost savings for me, and the numbers here really reflect that. So let's add up the annual savings for all of these examples just to give you an idea of the magnitude we're talking about here, okay? If you add up everything that I just discussed with the real numbers I just used, collectively, that saves you $29,404 per year. Now granted, $9,000 or almost a third of it is only on housing expenses. So let's say you don't own a house, you rent, you live with your parents, whatever. Even if you remove that $9,000 figure, you still can save over $20,000 a year doing this. That's $1,700 per month of potential savings. So again, if you include the house projects and stuff, if you are a homeowner, that number goes up to $2,450 per month that I have saved by making these sacrifices, which when you think about it is insane. Like, that's nuts. If your pre-tax income is $75,000 a year, that means after taxes you make roughly $60,000 take home depending on where you live. That's almost 50% of your total post-tax income. That's like if you just walked into your job tomorrow and for no reason at all, they were like, here's a 50% raise. That's the equivalent. Now I realize that these numbers also factor in me fixing my own house, and I realize that not everyone owns a house, but I want to point this out. When I started doing all these things, when I started taking this very seriously, I also did not own a house. However, I was able to save roughly the same dollar amount using a few of the other additional techniques that I'm going to discuss in the future episodes. So even though you might be thinking, oh, I don't currently and actively own a house, so these don't really apply, the thing is you can still hit similar numbers without a house using the other techniques that I'm going to describe. And then if you get to a point that you do own a house, the savings still compound from there when you get to the point that you do have to maintain it. But either way, those are some of the best examples that I've seen or that I personally experienced plans to maximize your utility value to save as much money as possible. And with that, congratulations, because you have officially completed level 2 of financial sacrifices. I'll put a link to the next video in the series here for you, but if you found this content helpful, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or sharing this with someone else who might find it useful as well. All of these help the channel grow, and it also increases the likelihood that YouTube shows this kind of content to more people, thereby helping others as well. But either way, that is all I have for this episode. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.